Well, good morning, darlings and distinguished gentlemen. It's your favorite girl, Emily, here to add a touch of sparkle to your day with the latest scoop from the charming world of Witworks. I trust you're all riding high on the waves of positivity on this splendid day. Now, let's dive into today's main event, courtesy of the fabulous folks at Gizmo League. These darlings are like the Justice League of tech gadgets and gaming accessories. No joke. They're all about bringing you the coolest, most futuristic goodies that'll make you feel like the star of your own sci-fi adventure. And let's not forget to shower them with some love. They're the reason we're all here today after all. So, let's give them a round of applause, shall we? And be sure to visit www.gizmoleague.com after the show to indulge in all things fabulous. Now, without further ado, let's get into today's most enchanting story. Top 10 Environmental Policies That Accidentally Worsened Climate Change. Introduction. In a perfect world, environmental policies would be our knight in shining armor, galloping in to save the day and restore the planet's health. But in the real world, even the best-laid plans can sometimes turn into epic fails, leaving us scratching our heads and wondering, did we just make things worse? Buckle up as we dive into the top 10 environmental policies that, despite the best intentions, ended up inadvertently contributing to climate change. Some of these policies are so ironic they'll make you laugh or cry, depending on your mood. 1. The deforestation solution. Replanting gone wrong. The deforestation problem. You know, that little issue where humans chop down forests faster than they can regrow themselves. In an attempt to make up for centuries of clear-cutting trees like they were going out of style, several countries thought, why not fix this by simply planting more trees? Sounds like a solid plan, right? Trees are trees, after all. What could possibly go wrong? Well, as it turns out, quite a bit. While the intention behind these massive replanting projects was certainly noble, props for the effort, execution was a bit, let's say, off target. Instead of recreating the lush, diverse ecosystems that naturally existed, many replanting efforts became more like a one-tree show. And I mean that literally. They planted the same species of tree over and over. The result? Forests that are more cookie-cutter than eco-masterpiece. This method of replanting is called monoculture, which basically means, let's put all our environmental eggs in one basket and hope for the best. Spoiler alert, Mother Nature did not approve of this decision. She was probably sitting back with her arms crossed, shaking her head like, oh, you guys are going to regret this. And, oh boy, did we. You see, natural forests thrive on diversity. They're like the original melting pot, where all kinds of trees, plants, insects, and animals work together to create a balanced, resilient ecosystem. When you replace that with a bunch of the same trees, like starting a forest of identical twins, you lose the benefits that come from different species doing their unique part in the grand scheme of things. Monocultures are more vulnerable to disease, pests, and environmental changes because, well, they lack variety. And here's the kicker. These monoculture forests don't even absorb carbon as efficiently as their diverse, wild counterparts. So, in our well-meaning effort to fight climate change and deforestation, we might have actually made things a bit worse. Who knew that trees could have different personalities? And the shy kid in the back might just be better at soaking up carbon than the popular pine tree everyone wanted to plant. In the end, while we were out there patting ourselves on the back for all those shiny new saplings, Mother Nature was probably rolling her eyes and thinking, nice try, but you're going to need a little more variety next time. Turns out, even in nature, diversity really is key. 2. Biofuels Bonanza, the corn conundrum. Let's dive into the world of biofuels, where our hero, the humble ear of corn, was supposed to lead us into a greener, cleaner future. Picture it, corn. The golden grain that's given us everything from corn chips to corn syrup to, well, more corn. And now, it was set to save the planet with its magical ability to transform into ethanol, a biofuel that's greener than a garden gnome's backyard. Sounds like a win-win, right? But alas, this story is less hero's journey and more, what could possibly go wrong? Here's the deal. The idea behind biofuels was to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, the stuff that's been making our planet feel like it's under a perpetual heat lamp. Corn-based ethanol was the poster child of this green revolution, promising to cut emissions and clean up our air. The catch? To produce this miracle fuel, we needed a lot of corn. And by a lot, I mean, hey, let's take some of the corn we normally use to make popcorn and just, put that in our gas tanks instead. This diversion of corn from our plates to our fuel tanks had a few unintended consequences. First off, it made food prices go up. Imagine going to the store for a bag of chips and finding out that your beloved snack is now a luxury item because your corn has been repurposed to fuel someone's car. That's right. The same corn that once added crunch to your nachos was now being used to keep someone's gas tank happy. Talk about a midlife crisis for your grocery budget. But the plot thickens. As demand for corn skyrocketed, farmers needed more land to grow it. And where do you think that land came from? Often it meant chopping down forests, which, let's be honest, isn't exactly a green move. In fact, clearing forests to plant cornfields led to increased greenhouse gas emissions, the very thing our biofuel was supposed to combat. So instead of hugging trees, we were turning them into cornfields, which is like trying to cure a headache by hitting yourself with a hammer. So, there we have it. The biofuels bonanza turned into a corn conundrum. We ended up with higher food prices, deforestation, and greenhouse gas emissions, all served with a side of ironic twist. Instead of saving the planet, we just managed to make our dinner more expensive and our planet a tad bit hotter. Who knew saving the environment involved so much corn drama? 3. The ozone layer fix? HFCs to the rescue. So, let's talk about our ongoing quest to save the ozone layer, which sounds like a plot twist in a sci-fi movie, doesn't it? We started by kicking chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, to the curb, which was a huge win for environmentalists. CFCs were the bad guys in this drama, responsible for depleting the ozone layer, which is like the Earth's sunscreen. Without it, our planet would be a giant toaster oven, and nobody wants that. Enter hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, the shiny new replacements for CFCs. They were supposed to be the heroes of this story. After all, they don't harm the ozone layer. However, as with any good superhero story, there's a twist. It turns out that while HFCs don't mess with the ozone, they're quite the greenhouse's gas aficionados. They trap heat like your grandma traps cookies, except the cookies are CO2 and the oven is our atmosphere. So, what did we get? We managed to save the ozone layer, but now we're dealing with a greenhouse effect that's as welcome as a surprise visit from your in-laws during a pandemic. HFCs, in their quest to be environmentally friendly, turned out to be a little too good at being, well, bad for climate change. It's like we traded in an old, unreliable car, CFCs, for a brand new high-performance model, HFCs, that's just a little too eager to zoom through the emissions limit. The situation serves as a stark reminder of the classic, "be careful what you wish for" trope. It's almost as if we're in an environmental sitcom where every solution comes with its own set of quirky problems. We've managed to dodge one bullet only to find ourselves dodging another, much bigger one. Of course, the good news is that we're aware of this hiccup and are working on the next generation of coolants and gases that hopefully won't come with a side of global warming. The saga continues, proving that the journey to environmental redemption is as twisty and complicated as the best plot lines in a soap opera. So while we're not quite out of the woods yet, at least we're still trying to find that happy ending where we save the planet without inadvertently cooking it in the process. In the end, it's a wild ride, full of trial and error, but hey, that's the price we pay for being environmental pioneers. Just remember, if you ever feel like your own life is a bit of a mess, take comfort in the fact that at least you're not single-handedly balancing the fate of the planet. 4. Carbon trading. The market miss. Carbon trading, in theory, seemed like a genius idea, kind of like one of those infomercials where they claim to solve all your problems with just one weird trick. The basic premise was simple. Let's limit carbon emissions by assigning a cost to polluting. Companies that exceeded their emissions cap would either have to reduce their pollution, which, would help the environment, or buy carbon credits from other companies that were emitting less. Easy, right? Well, in reality, it didn't quite work out that way. Instead of a magical market-driven solution to our climate crisis, what we got was more of a loophole bonanza. Companies quickly realized that they didn't have to actually reduce their emissions. They could just buy carbon offsets. to make it look like they were doing something. It's a bit like paying for a personal trainer to get in shape, but instead of hitting the gym, you just frame your receipt and call it progress. Spoiler alert, your abs won't thank you, and neither will the planet. These carbon offsets were supposed to represent real, measurable emissions reductions elsewhere. Think reforestation projects, renewable energy, or other eco-friendly activities. But, as it turns out, many of these offsets weren't quite as effective as advertised. Some were based on projects that would have happened anyway. Others were tied to shaky claims, and some didn't deliver the environmental benefits promised at all. So, in effect, companies were getting credit for doing nothing or close to it while continuing to pump carbon into the atmosphere. It's like having a get-out-of-jail-free card in Monopoly, except instead of going to jail, you're just continuing to trash the board. The concept of carbon trading was supposed to incentivize actual change, but instead, it created a system where companies could buy their way out of responsibility. Imagine if you could pay someone else to do your taxes, but when you get audited, you find out they just scribbled down some numbers and hoped no one would notice. That's kind of what happened with carbon trading. Lots of promises, not so much follow-through. In the end, carbon trading became less about saving the planet and more about gaming the system. The idea was good in theory, but in practice, it just didn't hit the mark. So, while the gym membership analogy might feel a little too real for some of us, in the case of carbon trading, the planet really does need us to show up. 5. Electric vehicles. The lithium dilemma. Electric vehicles, EVs, are the superheroes of the green revolution, zooming in to save the planet from the clutches of fossil fuels and pollution. They've become the poster child for sustainability, with sleek designs and zero emissions whispering, "Hey, I'm saving the planet one drive at a time." But hold on to your reusable coffee cup, because the story of your EV's battery has a bit of a plot twist. Enter the lithium dilemma. You see, those zippy little electric cars run on lithium-ion batteries, which sound fancy and futuristic, but the process to make them is, well, less than glamorous. The lithium that powers your eco-friendly ride doesn't just magically appear in a lab. Nope, it's mined, and mining lithium can be a messy business. Picture this: giant machines tearing through landscapes, digging up massive amounts of earth to get to those precious lithium deposits. It's not exactly the leave no trace vibe we were hoping for in our quest for a greener future. And then there's the not-so-small issue of where this is happening. Lithium mining is often concentrated in countries like Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia, where the extraction process uses a ton of water, an incredibly valuable resource in regions that are already facing water shortages. So while we may be patting ourselves on the back for cutting down on emissions, there is an environmental cost happening behind the scenes, far away from our carbon-free commutes. But wait, there's more! Once that lithium is extracted, processed, and assembled into a battery that powers your silent, smooth ride, what happens when the battery's lifespan is up? EV batteries don't just disappear into thin air. Wouldn't that be nice? If not recycled or disposed of properly, they can contribute to pollution. While strides are being made to recycle old EV batteries, it's not a perfect system just yet. So, yes, your EV might be super green when it's rolling down the highway, but when it's time to retire that battery, things can get a bit murky. In short, while electric vehicles are undeniably a huge step toward reducing our carbon footprint, they're not a perfect solution just yet. The lithium dilemma is a reminder that even the most eco-friendly tech comes with its own set of challenges. So, the next time you're silently cruising past a gas guzzler, just remember, even superheroes have their kryptonite, and for EVs, it's lithium. 6. Climate-resilient crops. A mixed bag. Climate-resilient crops, in theory, sound like agriculture's answer to a superhero. They're the sturdy plants that can brave the storms of climate change. Too much rain, not enough rain. Temperatures going haywire, no problem. These crops are designed to roll with whatever Mother Nature throws at them. It's like giving your tomatoes a raincoat and your corn a sunscreen, ensuring that they can still thrive even when the weather decides to play a cruel joke on farmers. But, like any superhero, these crops have a bit of a complicated side. While they're busy saving the day, they might also be causing some unintended chaos in the process. Some of these crops are genetically modified to be extra tough, which is fantastic when it comes to dealing with unpredictable climates. However, what's not so fantastic is that some of these modifications come with side effects that aren't quite as helpful. Think of it as the agricultural equivalent of a superhero with a tendency to knock over buildings while saving the city. For instance, there's the issue of invasive species. Sometimes these climate-resilient crops, once they get their superpowers, can turn into bullies in the ecosystem. They spread quickly, pushing out other plants that are supposed to be there, leading to a less diverse and more homogeneous environment. This, in turn, can mess with local wildlife, which often rely on a variety of plants to survive. So while we're celebrating our hardy crops, we're also watching as they unintentionally become the unruly guests at the biodiversity party, crowding out everyone else. And then there's the risk of creating superweeds. Some climate-resilient crops are designed to resist herbicides, which seems great because it helps farmers deal with weeds more easily. But nature, being the sneaky strategist it is, often fights back. Weeds can adapt and evolve, eventually becoming resistant to the herbicides too. Before you know it, we've got weeds that are stronger and harder to kill than before, leaving farmers in a bind, kind of like creating a monster that just gets bigger every time you try to defeat it. So while climate-resilient crops are undoubtedly a step toward making agriculture more sustainable in an unpredictable world, they come with a few strings attached. It's a delicate balancing act between progress and unforeseen consequences, proving once again that in nature, as in life, there's no such thing as a free lunch. 7. Plastic waste management. The recycling riddle. Plastic waste, our modern-day frenemy. You'd think that by now, with all the technological advancements we've made, recycling would be a well-oiled machine, seamlessly transforming yesterday's yogurt container into tomorrow's eco-friendly product. But alas, the truth is messier than that. Recycling plastics has turned into a bit of a head-scratcher, a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma, to quote Churchill, who, let's face it, probably had better things to worry about than sorting his plastics. The idea was simple. We toss our plastic waste into the blue bin, pat ourselves on the back for saving the planet, and move on. But here's the kicker. Many plastics labeled as recyclable actually don't get recycled at all. Yep, you heard that right. Despite all our good intentions and, let's be real, smug self-satisfaction, those plastic containers and bottles often end up right where we don't want them, landfills. The problem? Our recycling systems are not as efficient or widespread as we'd like to believe. Turns out, not all plastics are created equal. Some are easier to recycle, like your basic PET bottles, while others, like plastic bags, styrofoam, and that weird crinkly stuff your snacks come in, are more trouble than they're worth. These trickier plastics often require specific facilities that many areas simply don't have. And when recycling plants are overwhelmed, they sometimes opt to chuck the stuff in the landfill instead. So, all those times you carefully washed out your takeout container, that might have been for nothing. Talk about a plot twist. But wait, there's more! Even when plastics do get recycled, it's not always a perfect process. Plastics degrade each time they're reprocessed, meaning that they can only be recycled a limited number of times before they lose their usefulness and, you guessed it, end up as waste again. So, what was supposed to be a solution to plastic pollution is, in reality, just delaying the inevitable. It's like trying to put out a fire with a squirt gun. You're making an effort, but it's not really solving the core issue. The plastic just keeps piling up, adding to the environmental chaos we were hoping to avoid. So, next time you toss that plastic bottle into the recycling bin, maybe hold off on the self-congratulations, at least until the system gets its act together. 8. Renewable energy incentives. The wind turbine blunder. Renewable energy incentives are like those shiny new gym memberships everyone buys at the start of the year, full of good intentions, but sometimes a little flawed in the execution. They're meant to promote green energy, helping us save the planet one gust of wind at a time. But as with most things, the devil is in the details, and some policies have produced unintended consequences that make you scratch your head and go, wait, what? Take wind turbines, for example. They sound perfect, right? Big, sleek, and silently catching the breeze to generate clean energy. Except, well, they're not always so harmless. It turns out these towering structures can wreak havoc on local wildlife. Birds, for one, probably didn't get the memo about these spinning blades suddenly popping up in their flight paths. So, while the idea of reducing carbon emissions is great, some environmentalists might argue that bird casualties weren't supposed to be part of the deal. It's a bit like throwing a beach party to celebrate the ocean and accidentally littering it with plastic cups, good vibes, but poor follow through. And then there's the whole maintenance aspect. You'd think once you've installed these massive wind catchers, they'd just run like magic forever, right? Nope. Turns out, keeping them in tip-top shape requires a little less green energy than advertised. Many of these turbines rely on good old-fashioned fossil fuels for maintenance, whether it's sending out repair crews in fuel-guzzling trucks or using lubricants and other products derived from oil. So, while we're patting ourselves on the back for all the clean energy being produced, we're still quietly burning some fossil fuels behind the scenes to keep the whole operation running. It's kind of like driving to the gym and burning more calories getting there than you actually do on the treadmill. So, here we are. Wind turbines are catching the wind, but they're also catching some flack for their unintended side effects. It's a classic case of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sure, they're contributing to the fight against climate change, but they're also stirring up some turbulence, both for the environment and the critics keeping a close eye on them. Renewable energy is still a worthy pursuit, but let's just say the journey to a greener planet isn't as breezy as it first seemed. 9. Solar panel, land use. More sun, less space. Solar panels, the shining knights in the quest for renewable energy, valiantly battling climate change while looking pretty sleek in the process. But here's the rub. They need a whole lot of space to do their thing. And when I say a lot, I mean enough to make you wonder if they're trying to outdo the moon in terms of real estate. Imagine this. You've got a gorgeous, sprawling forest filled with chirping birds and rustling leaves. It's practically a postcard from nature. Then, in a plot twist that could rival a soap opera, this beautiful forest gets cleared out to make room for solar panels. Yes, those very panels that are supposed to save the world from the evils of carbon emissions. It's like ripping out your backyard garden to build a giant air conditioner. Just a smidge ironic, wouldn't you say? Now, I get it. Solar panels are essential. They harness the sun's rays to generate electricity, which is undeniably better than burning fossil fuels. But the reality is that these installations need a lot of elbow room. We're talking about vast solar farms sprawling across acres of land, which could otherwise be used to grow crops or preserve natural habitats. So while solar panels are doing their part to save the planet, they're also making us question whether their environmental impact is as clear-cut as we'd hoped. Think of it this way. It's a bit like the age-old debate over whether it's worth having a gigantic skylight in your home if it means cutting down a few trees to get it. Sure, you'll have a lovely, sun-drenched living room, but what about the trees that were there first? They were hosting a whole ecosystem after all. And now? Well, now you've got a view of the sun, but the forest? Not so much. And it gets better. Sometimes these solar farms end up on land that was previously agricultural. So, in a deliciously ironic twist, we're sacrificing farmland, where we could grow food, to generate energy that might help us in the long run. It's like trading in your kitchen garden for a solar-powered toaster, only to find out you're now having to order takeout because there's no land left to grow ingredients. So, while we cheer for the solar panels that are helping us take a step toward a greener future, we also need to be mindful of their own environmental footprint. It's a bit of a juggling act, really, to find that sweet spot where we harness the power of the sun without turning our planet into a giant parking lot for solar panels. 10. Dams for hydropower, the flood of emissions. Hydropower, the eco-friendly hero of the energy world, right? It's often celebrated as the clean, green alternative to fossil fuels. But before we get too cozy with the idea of water-powered electricity, let's take a moment to unpack the not-so-rosy side of this seemingly perfect energy solution. So, here's the deal. Building large dams for hydropower might seem like the ultimate move in fighting climate change. Picture it, a big, shiny dam holding back a river, its mighty turbines spinning away, generating electricity without spewing carbon into the atmosphere. Sounds great, doesn't it? But, as is often the case with grand plans, reality has a way of adding a few wrinkles to the picture. First off, let's talk about flooding. When a river is dammed, it's like opening the gates to a water park of biblical proportions. Vast stretches of land are submerged, which sounds scenic in theory but is a bit less glamorous in practice. Imagine the shock of a lush forest or a thriving community suddenly being transformed into a giant lake. Not exactly the kind of nature documentary you'd want to star in. And what's the catch with this flooding? Well, when vegetation gets dunked underwater, it starts to decompose. The process of decay releases methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Yes, that's right. The very thing we're trying to avoid by going green is now being exacerbated by the green we flooded. It's a bit like trying to clean up a mess by creating a new one. But wait, there's more! The ecosystem disruption and displacement of communities are another couple of party crashers. Rivers are like the lifeblood of many ecosystems, and when they're interrupted by dams, it's like pulling the plug on a vital organ. Fish and other aquatic life don't exactly thrive when their homes are flooded or fragmented. As for the communities living along these rivers, they often face displacement and upheaval as their homes and livelihoods are submerged. It's not exactly a fair trade for a few megawatts of electricity. In the grand scheme of things, the irony is almost poetic. An energy solution designed to be as green as a salad bar turns out to have its own hefty environmental footprint. Hydropower isn't the villain in this story, but it's certainly not the flawless hero we might have hoped for. It's a reminder that sometimes even the best intentions can have unintended consequences, and the quest for clean energy can sometimes come with a flood of challenges. Conclusion: it's clear that environmental policies, while well-intentioned, don't always hit the mark. Sometimes the road to a greener future is paved with ironic twists and unintended consequences. As we continue to develop and implement policies, let's remember to learn from these mishaps and strive for solutions that genuinely balance our need for progress with the health of our planet. After all, in the battle against climate change, every misstep is a lesson in disguise, or at least a story to tell at the next environmental conference. And that, my dears, wraps up our delightful escapade for today. Here at Whitworks Studios, we bask in the glow of your fabulousness and the loyalty of sharp minds like yours. If you're ready for the VIP treatment, craving endless access to our latest podcasts, and eager to support our creative ventures, why not waltz over to our premium subscribers club? You're all savvy enough to find your way without a map. But before you set off to conquer the world with your newfound knowledge, I must give a heartfelt shout-out to our lovely friends at Gizmo League. They're the real stars, making this podcast possible and bringing you the tech magic you adore. So, if you're itching for some gadget goodness, pop over to www.gizmoleague.com and see what's new. Until we meet again, keep that curiosity sparkling and stay as marvelous as ever. Until next time, my dears.